They say that the smell of a grocery store bakery cake, that overly sweet, chemical vanilla frosting, is supposed to trigger happy memories. Birthdays, anniversaries, milestones. But as I stood on the edge of the manicured grass of the Silver Ridge High football field, that scent made me want to gag. It was cloying, aggressive, and entirely out of place in the humid Oregon air. My mother, Martha, held the plastic tray with a trembling sort of pride, the pink lettering on the white frosting practically screaming in the afternoon sun, "To my son, on his big day, love, Mom." The audacity of those 6 words felt like a physical blow to my ribs. I looked at the cake, then at my sister, Sloane. She was leaning against a black SUV, looking like she'd stepped off a private jet from Manhattan rather than a 40-minute drive from the airport. Her emerald wrap dress was perfect. Her hair was a curated wave of auburn silk. She looked like a woman who had never spent a night scrubbing vomit out of a carpet or stayed awake until dawn wondering how to stretch $20 into a week's worth of groceries. She looked like a mother from a catalog. But she wasn't the mother. "Don't make that face, Elena," Martha hissed, her voice low enough to stay beneath the chatter of the gathering crowd but sharp enough to draw blood. "It's a celebration. For everyone." "For everyone?" I whispered, my voice cracking like dry wood. "She hasn't seen him since he was in diapers, Mom. She hasn't called. She didn't send a card when he made the honor roll. She didn't even know he wore glasses until 3 minutes ago." Sloane didn't look at me. She was too busy checking her reflection in her phone screen, adjusting a diamond earring that probably cost more than my car. She was here to claim a prize she hadn't earned. She was here to take back the boy she'd handed to me 19 years ago like an unwanted piece of luggage. And as the high school band began the first stumbling notes of the processional, I realized the trap wasn't just being set, it was already closing. My sister wasn't just here for the graduation. She was here to take Leo. And based on the way my mother was guarding that cake, I realized I was the only one in the family who wasn't in on the plan. 19 years ago, the air in Silver Ridge didn't smell like frosting. It smelled like rain and cedar and the metallic tang of fear. I was 21 years old, a week away from leaving this town forever. I had my life packed into 14 cardboard boxes. I had a full-ride fellowship to a law program in D.C. I had a vision of myself in a suit, standing in a courtroom, far away from the judgmental eyes of a small town where everyone knew your bloodline before they knew your name. Then the phone rang at 3 a.m. When I walked into my parents' kitchen that night, the light felt surgical. My father was standing by the sink, his back to me, staring out into a dark backyard as if he could find a way to escape through the glass. Martha was sitting at the table, a stack of folders in front of her. She wasn't crying. Martha didn't cry, she managed. And right then, she was managing a catastrophe. Sloane was 16. She was the golden child, the one the town projected all its hopes onto. She was the head cheerleader, the girl who made people smile just by walking into a room. And she was 4 months pregnant. "The neighbors cannot know," were the first words out of Martha's mouth. Not, "Sloane is okay." Not, "We're going to get through this." Just the preservation of a reputation that was already rotting from the inside. Martha pushed a legal folder toward me. I remember the sound of the paper sliding across the wood, a dry, final sound. "We've spoken to the community leaders. We've spoken to the clinic. There are 2 paths, Elena. Both of them depend on you." I looked at the folder. Inside was a closed adoption agreement. A stranger's name was already typed in the prospective parent slot. "If you don't do this," Martha said, her eyes locking onto mine with a cold, terrifying intensity, "Sloane will be sent to your aunt's in Ohio. The baby will be given away the moment it draws breath. We will tell the town she had a respiratory illness and needed a change of climate. And we will never, ever speak of this child again. Sloane's future will stay intact. The family name will stay clean." "And the second path?" I asked, my heart hammering against my teeth. Martha leaned in. "You take him. You move to the city. You tell people you met a man during your summer travels. You raise him as your own. You become the mother, Elena. You're the reliable one. You're the one who handles things. If you do this, the baby stays in the family bloodline. But Sloane stays free. I looked up at the ceiling. I could hear Sloane sobbing in her bedroom upstairs, a high, thin sound that pierced through the floorboards. She was a child herself. She was terrified. I looked at my boxes in the hallway. My fellowship. My DC apartment. My entire identity was sitting in those boxes. You have until dawn, Martha said, standing up. Because by 8 a.m., the neighbors will start walking their dogs, and the lie needs to be a reality. I spent the next 4 hours sitting in my car in the driveway, watching the rain blur the windshield. I thought about the life I had built. I thought about the law books I'd already bought. Then, I thought about that baby, a person who didn't exist yet but was already being treated like a stain to be scrubbed away. At 6:00 a.m., I walked back inside. I didn't say a word. I just picked up the pen and signed my name on the guardianship papers. I watched Martha's face relax into a mask of cold satisfaction. She didn't thank me. She just picked up the phone to cancel Sloane's illness and start my departure. I moved to a one-bedroom apartment in a city 3 hours away. I called the university and told them I wouldn't be coming. I told them there had been a family emergency. They told me I would lose the fellowship. I told them I knew. 6 months later, Leo was born. Sloane was in the room, but she refused to look at him. She gripped the bed rails and stared at the ceiling, her face a mask of detached agony. When the nurse held him out, 6 pounds, 4 ounces of red-faced, screaming life, Sloane turned her head to the wall. "Take it," Sloane whispered. "Not take him. It." I reached out. My hands were shaking so hard I thought I would drop him. But the moment his skin touched mine, the screaming stopped. His tiny, bird-like hand curled around my pinky finger, and he went still. In that cold, sterile hospital room, with my sister mourning her lost youth and my mother checking her watch to see if they could make the drive back before dark, I looked down at Leo and realized I wasn't his aunt. I wasn't a guardian. I was everything he had. The first 3 years were a blur of gray exhaustion. I worked as a teaching assistant during the day and a waitress at a 24-hour diner at night. I learned the precise geometry of a budget that only allowed for generic formula and dollar store diapers. I learned that you can actually survive on 4 hours of sleep if the person you're doing it for smiles at you when the sun comes up. Sloane, meanwhile, was flourishing. My mother would call me once a month. Not to ask if Leo was teething or if I needed help with the rent, but to give me updates on Sloane's triumphs. Sloane had won a scholarship to Emerson. Sloane was interning at a marketing firm in Boston. Sloane had met a boy from a wealthy family. "She's finally becoming the woman she was meant to be," Martha told me over the phone one night while I was sitting on my kitchen floor, crying because the electricity had been shut off and I didn't know how I was going to heat Leo's bottle. "That's great, Mom," I said, my voice hollow. Leo walked today. He walked from the couch to the table. "Don't you want to hear about that?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Don't be difficult, Elena. You knew the arrangement. You're his aunt. Let Sloane have her life." That was the refrain. Let Sloane have her life. As if my life was a currency I was expected to spend so my sister could stay rich. Every Christmas, I waited for a package. A toy. A sweater. A card. Anything to show that the woman who had brought this boy into the world remembered he existed. But the mailbox was always empty. I would go to the grocery store and gather the discarded Sunday newspapers, bringing them home to wrap Leo's meager gifts in the colorful comic sections. He loved it. He thought the bright colors were part of the surprise. To him, the world was perfect because I was in it. To me, the world was a ticking clock. When Leo was 5, I took him back to Silver Ridge for a weekend. I thought maybe, seeing him, Martha and Gerald would soften. I thought maybe the sight of their grandson, a brilliant, observant boy with a laugh like bells, would break through the ice. We walked into the house, and the first thing I saw was a framed photo on the mantel. It was Sloane's graduation picture. She was in a cap and gown, beaming, holding a bouquet of roses. There wasn't a single photo of Leo in the house. Not one. Martha greeted us at the door. She looked at Leo, then at me. She didn't bend down to hug him. She didn't tell him how much he'd grown. He looks like his father, she said, her voice flat. That boy from the movie theater. I hope he didn't inherit the temperament. Leo hid behind my leg. He sensed it, the coldness, the rejection. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and searching. Auntie Elena, he whispered. Can we go home now? Soon, Leo, I said, clutching his hand. That night, after Leo fell asleep in my old twin bed, I went downstairs to get a glass of water. I saw my mother sitting in the dark in the living room, staring at Sloane's photo. He's starting kindergarten in the fall, I said softly. Martha didn't turn around. Sloane is moving to Chicago. She's been promoted to director. She's dating a man named Julian. He's very successful. Old money. The kind of man who values a woman with a spotless past. Is that why you won't put his picture up, Mom? Because of Julian? Martha finally turned. Her eyes were like chips of flint. We have worked very hard to ensure Sloane's mistake didn't follow her. You are doing a fine job, Elena. But don't forget why you're doing it. You're the bridge. You're the one holding things together until the past can be forgotten. He isn't the past, I snapped. He's a person. He's your grandson. He is a complication, Martha replied, standing up and smoothing her nightgown. And complications are best kept in the shadows. I left the next morning before they were even awake. As I drove away from Silver Ridge, I looked at Leo in the rearview mirror, sleeping soundly with his head lolling against his car seat. I promised him then that he would never be a complication to me. He would never be a shadow. But as the years passed, the shadows began to grow longer. I saw the way Sloane's life was being curated like a museum exhibit. I saw the way my mother spoke about her in the present tense, while Leo and I were always relegated to the unfortunate past. And then, a month before Leo's high school graduation, the shadow finally stepped into the light. It started with a message on Leo's phone, a message from an account he didn't recognize, but a name that made my blood turn to ice. It was Sloane. And she wasn't just checking in. She was asking for a meeting. Not with me. With him. And as I sat at the kitchen table, watching Leo read the words on his screen, I realized that the arrangement Martha had spoken about 19 years ago had a final chapter one was never supposed to read. The message on Leo's screen was a digital earthquake, and the tremors were tearing through the foundation of everything I had spent 2 decades building. He sat across from me at our scarred oak kitchen table, the blue light of the smartphone casting sharp, unnatural shadows across his face, a face that, in that moment, looked terrifyingly like my sister's. He didn't show me the phone immediately. He just stared at it, his thumb hovering over the glass as if he were touching a live wire. She called me handsome, Leo said, his voice a low, hollow vibration. She says she's my bio mom. She says she's thought about me every single day. I felt the oxygen leave the room. Every single day? I thought about the 19 years of silence. I thought about the empty mailboxes on his birthdays. I thought about the time he had the croup at 3 years old and I had to choose between paying the heating bill or the copay for the nebulizer, while Sloane was posting photos of her celebratory champagne in the Hamptons. My hands, resting on a stack of library books I'd been meaning to shelve, began to shake. It wasn't the kind of shake you can hide, it was a deep, bone-level rattling. Leo, I started, but my throat was a desert. You don't have to reply. You don't have to do anything right now. He looked up at me, and for the first time in his life, there was a wall between us. It wasn't anger, not yet, but it was a profound, shimmering curiosity. The kind of curiosity that kills the things it loves. She said she's coming to the graduation, Mom. She says she's bringing someone she wants me to meet. Someone named Julian. The name Julian hit me like a physical blow. The old money fiancé. The man who valued a spotless past. I realized then that Sloane wasn't coming for Leo out of a sudden burst of maternal guilt. This wasn't about love. It was about branding. She had a successful career, a wealthy husband-to-be, and a high society life, but she was missing the one accessory that every perfect woman has, a child. A story of sacrifice and reunion. She was coming to Silver Ridge to retcon her own history, to turn her mistake into a heartwarming second act for her new audience. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a footstep toward a cliff. I knew my mother, Martha, was behind this. She had always seen me as a temporary solution, a human storage unit for the family's mess. Now that the mess was a handsome, valedictorian-bound young man, it was time to move him into the display case. But Leo wasn't an object. He was my heart, walking around outside my body. And as the sun began to peek through the blinds, I realized that the hardest part of being a mother isn't the sacrifice, it's the silence you have to keep to protect the person you sacrificed everything for. The week leading up to the graduation felt like a countdown to an execution. I moved through the library in a trance, scanning barcodes and stacking books while my mind ran through 1,000 different scenarios, all of them ending in Leo walking away. I found myself obsessively checking Sloane's Instagram, the professional headshot, the 4,000 followers, the curated life of marketing and mindfulness. She looked so soft in her photos, so empathetic. It was a masterpiece of deception. Then came the digital betrayal that nearly broke me. It was an accident, or maybe a subconscious act of malice by my mother. I was trying to help Martha set up her new tablet. She was always technologically illiterate, and when I opened the messaging app to test the connection, I saw a group thread that hadn't been cleared. The names at the top were Martha, Sloane, and Aunt Patrice. I shouldn't have scrolled. I told myself to close the app, to walk away, to keep my dignity. But the sight of Leo's name in those bubbles was a magnet I couldn't resist. I sat on my mother's floral sofa, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and I read the blueprint for my own erasure. Elena is just the placeholder, Martha had written 6 months ago. She's done a fine job with the basics, but Leo needs a different environment now. Sloane, Julian is prepared for the transition? Sloane's reply came minutes later, he's excited. He thinks the story of me reclaiming my son after years of unavoidable separation is incredibly moving. It'll play well at the firm's gala. We have the room in the London house ready. We just need to get through the ceremony without Elena making a scene. The room tilted. Unavoidable separation. I looked at the words until they blurred into black ink stains. They were planning to take him to London. They were discussing him like a piece of inherited furniture that needed to be moved from an attic to a parlor. And the most agonizing part was Patrice's response: Elena should be grateful. She got to have a child she never would have had otherwise. She's had her turn. I felt a scream building in my chest, a raw, primal sound that wanted to tear through the quiet of my mother's house. Had my turn? I had given up my law fellowship. I had worked 3 jobs. I had sewn the buttons back on his coats until my fingers bled. I had been the one who stayed up through the night terrors and the flu and the heartbreak of every auntie address that felt like a needle in my soul. I wasn't a placeholder. I was the architect of his entire existence. I didn't confront Martha. I didn't send the screenshots to Sloane. I did something much more difficult. I went home, sat on the porch, and waited for Leo. When he arrived, he was carrying his cap and gown, the navy blue fabric draped over his arm. He looked so grown up, so certain of himself. I wanted to grab him, to hide him in the basement, to tell him that the people he thought were his real family were actually vultures waiting to pick over the bones of our life. But I looked at his face, the excitement, the nerves, and I knew that if I spoke now, I would be the one who looked like the villain. I had to let the play begin. Graduation morning arrived with a cruel, beautiful clarity. The Oregon sky was a deep, heartless blue, and the air was thick with the scent of mown grass and expectation. I watched Leo iron his own shirt in the kitchen, a skill I had taught him when he was 12. He was meticulous, pressing the collar until it was sharp enough to cut. He seemed distant, his mind already on the stage, or perhaps on the woman who was currently flying in to steal his spotlight. "Are you okay, Mom?" he asked, not looking up from the iron. It was the first time he'd called me Mom since the message arrived. It felt like a life raft in a storm. "I'm just proud of you, Leo. That's all." He stopped the iron. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine for a truth I wasn't ready to give. "Whatever happens today, you know, right?" "I know," I said, though I didn't know anything at all. I went to my room to get dressed, my hands fumbling with the zipper of my navy blue dress. It was the only nice thing I owned, bought specifically for this day. I felt like a fraud. I felt like a soldier dressing for a battle I had already lost. Before I left, I reached under my bed and pulled out the small, fireproof safe. I opened it and took out the blue scarf, the one I'd knitted for him during that freezing winter when the furnace died. It was frayed, the yarn pilling, but it held the scent of our small, difficult, beautiful life. I folded it and tucked it into my purse. A talisman against the emerald green silk and diamond earrings that were coming for us. As we drove toward the high school, Leo was silent, staring out the window at the familiar streets of Silver Ridge. He didn't see the vultures circling. He didn't see the cake Martha was currently carrying toward the bleachers. He only saw the finish line. We pulled into the parking lot, and the first thing I saw was the black SUV. It was parked in the VIP slot near the entrance, its tinted windows reflecting the sun like a polished obsidian mirror. The door opened, and Sloane stepped out. She didn't look like a sister, she looked like a conqueror. And standing beside her was Julian, tall, silver-haired, and radiating the kind of effortless power that only comes from never having had to fight for anything in your life. Sloane spotted us immediately. She didn't hesitate. She walked toward us across the gravel, her heels clicking a rhythmic, predatory beat. She didn't look at me. Her eyes were locked on Leo, a hungry, terrifying light in them. "Leo," she breathed, reaching out as if to touch his face. Leo took a step back, a subtle, instinctive flinch that made my heart leap with a desperate hope. But then, he stopped. He looked at her, then at Julian, then back at me. The air between us was suddenly electric, heavy with 19 years of secrets and a betrayal that was about to be made public. Sloane smiled, a perfect, practiced expression of maternal warmth. "It's time, don't you think? To finally be the family we were meant to be." She turned to me then, her smile sharpening into something cold and triumphant. She reached into her designer bag and pulled out a small, white envelope. She held it out to me, her voice a low, lethal whisper that Leo couldn't hear. "Thank you for the childcare, Elena. But your contract is up." I stared at the envelope, my heart stopping in my chest as I realized exactly what was inside, and more importantly, what Sloane was about to do the moment Leo stepped onto that stage. The weight of that envelope in my hand felt like a lead weight, but I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew the smell of that kind of paper, it smelled like a payoff. It was the scent of someone who believed that 19 years of sweat, tears, and missed meals could be settled with a signature and a decimal point. I tucked it into my bag, right next to the frayed blue scarf, and met Sloane's eyes. She expected me to crumble. She expected the reliable one to bow out gracefully so the golden one could take the bow. But she had forgotten one thing. She had spent the last 2 decades learning how to sell a brand, while I had spent them learning how to protect a son. "The ceremony is starting," I said, my voice as level as a horizon line. "You should find your seat, Sloane. You wouldn't want to miss a single second of what's coming." I walked past her, my shoulder brushing hers, and led Leo toward the staging area. The air in the gymnasium was thick, a humid soup of cheap perfume, floor wax, and the frantic energy of 300 teenagers ready to burst out of their skins. I could feel Julian's eyes on my back, cool, detached, calculating the net worth of the woman in the 3-year-old navy dress. I didn't turn around. I reached out and squeezed Leo's hand one last time. His palm was damp, his grip tight. "I have to go line up," he whispered. He looked at the emerald green dress moving toward the front row, then back at me. There was a question in his eyes, a deep-seated fear that the world he knew was about to be replaced by something shinier and hollower. "Go," I told him. "Do your speech. Speak your truth, Leo. That's all you've ever had to do." I watched him walk away, his navy blue gown billowing behind him like a cape. As I found my seat in the third row, next to the heavy, floral scent of my mother and that god-awful grocery store cake, I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. This was the peak. This was the moment where the blue scarf met the emerald silk. Martha leaned over, her shoulder pressing into mine, her eyes fixed on the stage with a predatory gleam. "Sloane looks beautiful, doesn't she?" Martha whispered. "Julian is very impressed with the school. He says it has a charming, rustic quality. They're looking at properties in London near the best universities, Elena. They want the best for him." I looked at the stage, where the faculty was beginning to take their seats. "He already has the best, Mom. He has a mother who knows his favorite book is The Count of Monte Cristo, because it's about a man who was wronged and took back his life. Does Sloane know that? Does Julian?" Martha's face hardened, the mask of the proud grandmother slipping for a fraction of a second. "Don't be petty. This is the heart-hitting reality, Elena. Biology is the only thing that lasts. Everything else is just temporary help." The music started, the traditional, plodding march of pomp and circumstance. The audience rose as the graduates began to file in. I saw Leo. He was the fourth one in line, his head held high, his jaw set in that way he only does when he's decided on something. He didn't look at the front row where Sloane sat with her phone out, already recording her reunion content. He looked at me. And in that look, I felt a surge of something so powerful it made my vision blur. It wasn't just love. It was a signal. The hard-hitting peak wasn't just his speech, it was the fact that he was the only person in this room who truly knew the value of the blue scarf. The big reveal wasn't just a moment in time. It was an avalanche that had been building for 19 years, and the first snow was starting to fall. As the principal began the opening remarks, the gymnasium became a pressure cooker. Every thank you to the parents, every mention of support systems, felt like a barb aimed at the empty space where my sister should have been. Sloane was leaning forward, her posture perfect, her face a masterpiece of practiced emotion. She was waiting for the moment Leo was introduced as valedictorian. She was waiting to stand up, to be seen, to be the real mom that the cake promised. Beside her, Julian looked like a man watching a play he'd already read the script for. He was prepared for the heartwarming climax where the long-lost mother and the brilliant son are reunited under the spotlights of small-town Oregon. It was a story that would look great on a Christmas card sent from a London townhouse. I reached into my bag and felt the envelope Sloane had given me. I finally pulled it out, hidden by the program on my lap, and tore the edge. Inside wasn't just a check. It was a contract, a non-disclosure and relinquishment of contact agreement. It offered me $500,000 to move out of the state, to change my phone number, and to never contact Leo again once he turned 18. It was a bill of sale for my son. A hot, white rage flickered in my gut, but I didn't let it show. I looked at the back of Sloane's head, at the expensive auburn waves, and I realized how little she understood about the boy she'd given up. She thought he could be bought because she could be bought. She thought Martha's approval was the highest currency in the world. Suddenly, the principal's voice cut through my thoughts. And now, to give the valedictorian address, please welcome Leo Reeves. The applause was thunderous. Leo was a favorite in Silver Ridge. The boy who helped the elderly at the library, the boy who tutored the struggling freshmen, the boy who worked at the diner to help his mother with the bills. As he stepped up to the podium, Sloane stood up. She didn't wait for him to speak. She stood up and started clapping, her hands held high, her face turned toward the crowd so they could see her tears. "That's my son," she called out, her voice projecting with the precision of a trained actress. "That's my boy." The room went silent. People turned in their seats, whispering, confused. They knew me. They knew I had raised him. They'd seen me at every PTA meeting, every flu shot, every late-night grocery run. Martha beamed, nodding at the neighbors, legitimizing the lie with every movement of her head. Leo reached the podium. He didn't look at Sloane. He didn't acknowledge her standing there in her emerald dress, making herself the center of his moment. He adjusted the microphone, his hands steady, and looked out over the crowd. He looked past the real mom cake, past Julian's cold smile, and straight at me. "I had a whole speech written," Leo said, his voice echoing through the rafters. "I wrote about the future. I wrote about possibilities. But standing here today, looking at the people in the front row, I realize I need to talk about the past. I need to talk about a blue scarf. You could hear a pin drop in that gymnasium." Sloane's smile flickered, a tiny crack in the porcelain. She slowly sat back down, her phone still recording, but her eyes were narrowing. She didn't know about a blue scarf. She didn't know about the winters without heat. She only knew about the London house and the spotless past. Leo reached into the pocket of his graduation vest and pulled out something small. He held it up for the entire room to see. It wasn't the scarf, I had that, it was a single, crumpled piece of newsprint. A comic strip from a Sunday paper from 10 years ago. "For most of my life," Leo said, "I thought everyone's Christmas presents were wrapped in the Sunday funnies. I thought it was a special tradition. I didn't know it was because the woman who raised me had to choose between wrapping paper and the electric bill. I didn't know that every auntie I said was a scar on her heart. But I'm 19 now. And I've seen the messages." Sloane froze. Julian's head turned sharply toward her. Martha's hand flew to her throat. The big reveal wasn't just coming, it was already here. "I've seen the group chat," Leo continued, his voice growing stronger. "I've seen the plan to transition me to London like I'm a piece of luggage. I've seen the word placeholder used to describe the only person who ever stayed up with me when I was sick. And I've seen the cake." He pointed a finger at the bleachers, at the white frosting and pink lettering that Martha was trying to hide behind her purse. "My mother is in this room," Leo said, and the silence was so heavy it felt like it would break the floorboards. "But she isn't wearing emerald green. And she didn't fly in yesterday to claim a prize she didn't earn. She's been here for 7,000 days, and she's never once asked for a spotlight." I felt the tears finally break, hot and fast, running down my face. Beside me, Martha was vibrating with a terrified, silent fury. Sloane's face was no longer a masterpiece, it was a wreck of smudged mascara and raw, ugly shock. Leo took a breath, his eyes locked on mine, and he reached into his gown, pulling out a set of folded legal documents. "Sloane, you asked me to meet Julian," Leo said, looking down at his biological mother. "And Julian, I'm sure you're a successful man. But there's something you should know about the woman you're about to marry. There's something she signed 19 years ago, and there's something I signed this morning." He held the papers up, the light from the gymnasium rafters catching the official seal at the bottom. "This isn't a diploma," Leo said, a cold, lethal edge to his voice. "This is a subpoena." The room erupted into a low roar of shock. Julian stood up, his face pale, his eyes darting between Sloane and the boy on the stage. Sloane reached for her bag, her movements frantic, her spotless past dissolving in real time. But Leo wasn't finished. He looked at me, a soft, beautiful smile breaking through the tension. "Mom," he said, the word ringing out like a bell. I have one more thing to show everyone. Something that was tucked into the back of that fireproof safe. He reached behind the podium and pulled out a small, portable projector. He clicked a button, and the giant screen behind him flickered to life. It wasn't a school logo. It was a grainy, 30-second clip from a flip phone 19 years ago. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. It was the video of Leo's first steps. But it wasn't just him. The camera panned up, and for the first time in 19 years, the entire town of Silver Ridge saw the truth of that day in the hospital. A video showing exactly who held the baby, and who turned their face to the wall. And as the video played, I saw Julian's hand drop from Sloane's arm as if she had turned into a snake. The big reveal was only halfway over, because as the clip ended, a new image appeared on the screen, a screenshot of the check Sloane had just tried to hand me, alongside the contract to buy my silence. The sound of Julian's leather soles hitting the hardwood of the gymnasium floor was the only thing heard over the low, rhythmic hum of the overhead projector. It was a crisp, final sound. Sloane didn't move. She sat frozen, watching the man she'd built her future around walk toward the double doors without so much as a backward glance. The spotless past she had sold him had just been splattered with 19 years of cold, hard truth. I watched him go, feeling a strange, detached pity. But as the heavy doors swung shut, the silence in the room shifted. It was no longer a stunned silence, it was a hungry one. 200 pairs of eyes pivoted back to the stage, back to Leo. The video on the screen looped back to the beginning. There I was, 19 years younger, holding a bundle of white cloth while my sister stared at the window as if she were waiting for a bus. It was a receipt for every hour of sleep I'd traded, every dream I'd deferred, and every lie I'd told to keep the Summers family name from tarnishing. Martha, sitting beside me, was making a soft, wet sound. She looked at the cake on her lap, the one with the pink frosting and the lie written in sugar, and for the first time in her life, I saw Martha Summers look small. She realized the neighbors weren't just going to find out. They were watching the autopsy. Leo didn't wait for the room to recover. "I've spent the last 6 weeks doing some math," he said, his voice echoing off the brick walls. "I've been looking at the teaching assistant wages from 2007. I've been looking at the cost of a one-bedroom apartment on 4th Street. I've been looking at the price of generic antibiotics in a winter where the heat doesn't work." He looked down at Sloane. "My mother, the woman in the third row, spent $400,000 of her life on me. Not in a lump sum. In nickels and dimes. In the hours she spent waitressing after I went to bed. In the fellowship she gave up so I wouldn't be a complication in a stranger's house. And today, Sloane, you tried to pay her back with a check for $500,000. You thought my life had a $500,000 markup." Leo leaned into the microphone. "But you forgot to factor in the interest. You forgot to factor in the blue scarf." Leo stepped away from the podium. He walked to the edge of the stage and looked directly at our neighbor, Mrs. Gable. "Mrs. Gable, you remember the winter of 2012? The one where the pipes froze and you saw my mother carrying jugs of water from the grocery store in the snow?" Mrs. Gable nodded slowly. "You probably wondered where my grandmother was that night," Leo continued. "Well, I've got the answer right here." He clicked the remote. The projector screen changed again. It was a series of bank statements showing regular, monthly transfers from Martha and Gerald to a Boston marketing firm. The room inhaled as one. I hadn't known. While I was scrubbing floors to buy Leo's shoes, my parents were sending the family savings to Sloane to help her establish her brand. They weren't just protecting the reputation, they were investing in the erasure of my son. Sloane stood up. She looked like a cornered animal. It was a loan, she screamed. It was an investment in my career so I could provide for him later. Provide for him when? Leo shouted back. When he was a valedictorian who looked good in a press release? You didn't invest in a son, Sloane. You invested in a contingency plan. And today, the plan failed. Leo looked at me, and the rage vanished. I told you I had a speech about the future, Mom. And I do. But it's not the one the school approved. He looked at the principal, who was frozen in the wings. Principal Miller, I'd like to introduce a guest speaker. Someone who has been the silent narrator of this story for 19 years. The double doors at the back of the gym opened for a man in a plain gray suit carrying a leather briefcase. It was a local lawyer named Marcus Thorne. And walking in beside him was a man I hadn't seen in 19 years. It was Tyler. Leo's biological father. Sloane's face went a sickly, translucent gray. Martha let out a high-pitched whimper and finally dropped the cake. It hit the floor with a dull, wet thud, the white frosting smearing across the hardwood. Tyler didn't look at Sloane. He walked down the center aisle, his eyes fixed on the boy on the stage. He told me the baby died, Tyler said, his voice small but carrying through the room. He looked at Martha. You told me there were complications at the birth. You told me I should move away and start over because there was nothing left for me here. They had systematically dismantled a family before it could even begin. Marcus Thorne stepped up to the stage and handed Leo a new folder. 19 years ago, Leo said, my mother, Myra, signed papers that said she was my guardian. She did it to save me from being a secret. But today, we're doing something else. He looked at Tyler, then at me. I'm not a Summers. I never was. I was a secret you all kept. But secrets have a way of growing up. And this morning, Tyler and Myra and I signed something that the state of Oregon has already filed. He opened the folder. It was an adult adoption. I'm changing my name, Leo said. But I'm not taking the name of the woman who gave me up. And I'm not taking the name of the family that tried to buy my silence. I'm taking the name of the person who actually showed up. My name is Leo Reeves. The audience roared. But Leo wasn't finished. There's one more thing you all need to see. One more message from the group chat that I saved for the very end. He clicked the remote one last time. It was a scanned legal document, a codicil to the last will and testament of Gerald and Martha Summers, dated only 72 hours ago. It talked about a multi-million-dollar inheritance from our great-uncle Elias. The clause was highlighted. Funds to be released only upon the legal residency of Sloane's firstborn son in a residence owned by the Summers Trust. The gym went ice cold. Leo stood at the podium, his face illuminated by the glow of the betrayal. He wasn't a son to them. He was a key to a vault of money. Sloane needed Leo in that London house because without his physical presence, the trust remained locked. You didn't come back for me, Sloane, Leo said. You came back for the codicil. And you, Grandma. You didn't help me because you loved me. You helped me because I was a long-term investment that finally matured. Sloane surged to her feet. It's my money. It was meant to be mine. The golden child was gone. In her place was a woman whose soul was as hollow as her promises. Martha stood up, too. Turn it off. Gerald, make them turn it off. But Gerald didn't move. He sat there, staring at the ruined cake on the floor. I'm not a key, Sloane, Leo said. And I'm not a Summers. It's not about biology, and it's not about a trust fund. It's about the woman who chose me. The gym erupted into a roar of vindication. Sloane turned to run, but the aisle was blocked by the people of Silver Ridge, parents, teachers, neighbors, who simply refused to move. They stood there, a human wall of judgment. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip as we spilled out onto the school lawn. I was standing near the old oak tree when I saw Martha marching toward me. You've ruined her. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? I didn't do anything, Mom, I said, my voice steady. I just stopped lying for you. If the truth ruined the family, then the family was already a ruin. Leo stepped between us. You should go, Grandma. The neighbors are watching. Martha retreated toward the parking lot. Then there was Sloane. She walked toward us. I gave you life, she whispered. Doesn't that count for anything? Leo reached into his pocket and pulled out the $500,000 bribe. He dropped it onto the grass, right next to the ruined cake. You gave me life, Sloane. But Myra gave me a soul. You can keep the money. You're going to need it for the lawyers. Tyler approached us. He looked at Leo, then at me. I'm so sorry. I know, Leo said. We have time. The black SUV pulled out of the lot, Sloane's face a pale ghost behind the glass. The summer's legacy was leaving Silver Ridge in a cloud of exhaust. We sat on the porch of our small house that evening. Leo was sitting on the steps, staring at the fireflies. Are you okay, Mom? I smiled. I'm better than okay, Leo. I'm free. I left the cake on the lawn, he said with a grin. I hope the ants like pink frosting. We laughed. A sound that felt like it was clearing out the dust of 2 decades. I have something for you, I said, reaching into my bag. I pulled out the original yellow baby blanket. Your grandmother said this was mine when I was born, I said. Then she gave it to me to wrap you in. I've kept it because I thought it was a symbol of my sacrifice. But I realized something today. It's not a symbol of sacrifice. It's a symbol of a beginning. It's the warmth inside it that mattered. And that warmth, that was always ours. Leo folded the blanket and draped it over his lap. He looked at me. I'm going to go to the community college here. I want to stay close. You don't have to stay for me, Leo. I'm not staying for you, he said, taking my hand. I'm staying for us. We've got a lot of Christmas presents to wrap, Mom. And this year, I think we should buy the fancy paper. The kind with the gold foil. I leaned my head back and watched the stars come out. I was right here, in the light, holding the hand of the boy I had fought the world for. The Summers family might have had the emeralds and the London house, but we had the porch, the truth, and a future that didn't require a single lie to stay beautiful. And that was more than enough. That was everything.
Have a story like this? Send it to us, and we'll share it with the world. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more true family drama. Thanks for watching.